start. Jeremiah 17 and verse number 9. Cthulhu, you want to read for us?
Jeremiah 17, verse 9.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?
Okay. This is a powerful verse, actually, that teaches us about our heart. And it's actually a really, really important thing to understand what God says about our hearts. The question was asking, can I trust my emotions to be an indicator of if God is near? So I think we should ask a more basic question first, actually, before we answer that specific one. The more basic question would be, can you trust your emotions as a reliable indicator for anything? Not just for, is God near? Because, when you think about is God near, I think the person who asked the question meant like, sometimes you might feel like God is not answering your prayers. You might feel like God is very far away. And so your emotions might be telling you, God is not listening to me. God is not near me. And so I don't know why. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. But my feelings are telling me God is far away. Or the other side of that can be, you can go to... maybe you go to a gospel music concert, or you go to a church service, or some people say, oh, when I got baptized, I felt like God, he was so close to me. Or when this prophet, he prayed for me, it was like, wow. I had a guy tell me one time, this guy prophesied over me, and he said it was like I was hit with lightning. Wham! I said, what happened? He said, no, it was the Holy Spirit just came on me and knocked me to the ground. And this was a big guy. So his emotions were telling him, hey, God is near. That was his interpretation. Okay. But, so your heart can when we talk about emotions, you understand in the Bible, the word usually to indicate our emotions is the word heart. Your heart. When the Bible talks about your heart, it's not talking about this one that pumps the blood, usually. Usually it's talking about the real you, your soul. Your heart usually involves three things in the Bible. It involves your thoughts, it involves your emotions, and it involves your choices. And those three things go together. It's actually kind of difficult to take a knife and separate them into three nice, distinct categories. Because usually when you have a thought, you have a feeling attached to that thought. And attached to the thought and the feeling is usually a choice that you're going to make. And sometimes you're like, hey, I don't know what to do. I'm thinking this, I'm feeling this, I'm confused, I don't know what to do. But you're going to take a decision one way or another, even if your decision is to do nothing. You know what I'm saying? So like you go for a job interview when you finish your education here. And you're going to have a lot of thoughts about that job interview. Obvious. I think you're going to have a lot of feelings when you go for that job interview. And then you're going to make some choices. Maybe you're going to keep looking for another job because your thoughts and feelings tell you, hey, it didn't go well. So we do this every day, unconsciously. We're always, this is our heart. We have thoughts, we have feelings, and we make choices. Okay. So the question is, can that emotions in my heart, can it be a good indicator if God is near or not? But first we really should know what God tells us about our hearts. To know whether or not our heart is actually a good indicator. And before we look at what God says, let me ask you the question, Do you think your heart is a good indicator? Or you don't think your heart is a good indicator? Just not about God necessarily, but even about, other things in life. Sometimes we rely on our heart, on our thoughts, to help us to know what I should think about this guy, or what I should do about this problem, or what I should, how am I going to fix this complicated mess in my life? So you think about it, and you think about it, and you think about it. Did you ever think about a problem and come to a decision within your heart? You say, okay, no, I know what to do. And then you do that thing, whatever it was that you thought about and you decided, and then you end up regretting it. And you look back later on and you say, I think I made a mistake. I thought this was the right path, but I think now I understand more. I think I should have gone this way. I mean, how many times has your heart given you confidence that that's the right thing to do? And then later on, you got more knowledge, you got more understanding, and you said, no, I made a mistake. I don't know about you, but that's happened to me more times than I care to think about in my life, actually. And what's amazing is, sorry, I'm just going to shift here. What's amazing is, when you make a decision like that, you think about this problem and you make a decision for how to solve it, you don't make the wrong decision on purpose, do you? Usually when you make a decision, it's because you've thought about it. Maybe you talked to some friends about it. Maybe you got some counsel from, a mentor or a parent or an uncle or a go-go, a pastor. So you've thought about what to do, and okay, I think that's the right path, and you do it. Nobody ever goes to make a decision saying, I say nobody. I don't think it's the normal thing. Most people don't make a decision saying, I know this is the dumb decision. I know this is the wrong decision, but I'm doing it anyway. That's kind of stupid, actually. Usually when we make decisions, it's because we think at that time it's the right choice. But then the thing is, our hearts are so unreliable because later on we find out, I was lacking information, so I made the wrong decision. Or I was thinking about it the wrong way. Or this guy deceived me, and I thought this was true, and it wasn't the case. And so, and it's complicated. So when you think about your heart, your thoughts, and your emotions, just with life in general, how reliable would you say you have found your heart to be in making decisions for your life? Let me just get some feedback from you.
Well, when we have made poor decisions in Jesus Christ.
You're familiar with making poor decisions. I think you're just like me. You agree? It's, what's amazing is when we think about that, if we're honest, we'll all say the same thing. I've made a lot of poor decisions. But then the next time we have to make a decision, what's amazing is how quick we are to put confidence in our heart. That same heart that led us the wrong direction last time, I'm sure this time I've got it figured out. And we trust our heart again, even though last time our heart deceived us. So in this verse, in Jeremiah 17:9, let's just understand what God says, because if we would actually listen to what God says in this verse, it will change the way that you live if you'll pay attention here. He says in verse 9, the heart is deceitful above all things. and it is desperately wicked. And then he asks a question, 4 words, who can know it? That's a good question. Do you even really know all the things that are in your own heart? I mean, how well do you even really understand yourself? Did you ever find yourself in a situation where you were doing something that you never thought you would ever do, but here you are, and you're doing it? And while you're doing it, you're thinking, why am I doing this? I never thought I was the kind of person who would do this. But here I am, I'm doing it. And you're disappointed in yourself because you're doing something that you didn't think you would ever do. Obviously, I'm talking about making a wrong moral choice. I think the first time somebody goes to, so let me give an example. If you're raised by a father or a mother who's a drunk and abuses alcohol, and you've grown up seeing the effects of that. Maybe your father was beating you or beating your mother or beating your siblings, and you could look at that and you could say, as a young person, I don't ever want to be like that when I grow up. Because you could see the choice to drink alcohol changed your father or whoever that person is into a different kind of a person. And while they're under the influence of alcohol, they become very abusive and very aggressive. And you can look at it and you say, I don't ever want to be that. In fact, I'm never going to do that. You might say that as a young child, especially if your father was abusive. I'm never going to do that when I grow up. And then you find when you grow up, the temptation becomes strong because your friends are all going to the tavern and they're like, come, we're going to have a good time. God, nothing bad can happen. We're just going to relax. We're just chilling. We're just going to enjoy. Come on. And then you go with them because of peer pressure, because of whatever. You get there to the tavern and you're drinking, and all of a sudden in your mind comes that picture from when you were small, and you said, I told myself, I promised myself I was never going to do this. But here I am, and I'm doing it. Okay, that's just one example. We could think about a lot of examples. I think you get the picture. Sometimes we can think about ourselves and say, I will never do that. Fill in the blank. I will never get drunk. I will never have multiple partners. I will never cheat on my partner. I will never beat my children. I will never lie to my husband or my wife. I will never, commit fraud. Fill in the blank. I will never do this. We make ourselves like these promises, and then at some point in life we find ourselves breaking those promises that we made to ourselves or that we made to God. You understand what I'm talking about? And this is a good example of what the Bible says. When God says your heart is deceitful above all things, that word deceitful, it means it lies. Your heart lies. And what's interesting is you have to think about this question. Who is your heart lying to? Who's the number one person that your heart lies to the most often? Yourself. My heart lies to me every day. Every single day. That's what God says. Your heart is, He doesn't just say your heart is deceitful. You notice the next words? The heart is deceitful, what? Above all things. Sure. Okay, so maybe you have met someone in your life who was deceitful, But they weren't always deceitful. Sometimes when you talked with that person, you could trust them. There goes those conies again. We should catch one of them for dinner sometime. Yeah, he's a big one. You know, a deceitful person, you might find that sometimes they lie to you and sometimes they tell you the truth. And so next time, you know, you're trying to evaluate them. Like, is he speaking the truth or not? Can I trust him this time or not? I'm not sure. Last time he lied to me, but maybe today he's speaking truly. But God says your heart is deceitful above all things. Your heart is more deceitful than a neighbor or a mata who lies to you sometimes. In other words, what God is saying is, you should know that your heart prefers to lie to you. It does. Now, this is kind of distressing, actually, because most people will try to rely on their heart as like the guide for their life, actually. But when you're relying on your heart to guide your life, and your heart is deceitful above all things, what can the end result of that be? Your heart's going to lie to you. You're going to, when you're deceived, is when someone lies to you and you believe it. And we're very good at this. Our heart lies to us, and we're like, that's a good idea. I like that. Oh, that's really clever. And it's not clever at all. And it's not a good idea at all. But our heart lied to us, and we believed the lie. We're convinced. And we move forward with that lie. And what's going to happen when you move forward with a lie? It's not going to work out. Now, sometimes a lie works out in the short term, but it never works out in the long term. You know? Like the thief. His heart convinces him to steal. And he says, okay, that's a good plan. Look, I'm suffering, I'm hungry. So if my neighbor has something, if I take his things and he doesn't find me, then, you know, it's a win-win for me. So his heart convinces him to steal from his neighbor, and maybe he can steal, and he gets it, and he's happy because he got what he wanted and he didn't get in trouble. But what's going to happen now? Well, he's going to want to do it again and again and again, and he's going to keep doing it, but eventually the thief is going to get caught. You know what I'm saying? Eventually, you might steal 5 times and get away with it, but on the 6th time, you know, and each time that you do it and nobody catches you, you deceive yourself a little bit more. It's like, you see, it's okay to steal. I can steal and nobody catches me. I can steal, there's no consequence. So what's happening in that situation is your heart is lying to you and you're believing it. And the more that you do it without any consequence, the more you believe it. But that doesn't mean that there's no consequence for stealing, even though you didn't get caught yet. Every thief is going to be caught. Even if you don't get caught in this life, you're going to be caught. Because the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. So God sees you when you steal. And even if there's no consequence, the worst consequence is that you think I can break God's law by stealing and get away with it. And it works out. So this thing about our heart, this is what we need to know about it. Is deceitful above all things, and it is desperately wicked. And who can know it? It's difficult for us to understand our own heart. Because our heart is, we can say it like the Bible says, our heart is darkened and cursed by sin. So the heart really is the place the devil wants to deceive us. He wants to trick us. He wants us to believe lies in our heart. He wants us to think too many things that are not true. And the biggest lies the devil tells us are things that disagree with what God says. And we do this all the time. God says, don't trust your heart. And we're like, really? If I can't trust my own heart, who am I supposed to trust? Like, come on. Okay, I understand. I'm not going to trust my neighbor. I'm not going to trust, my wife's, he's dead now. My wife's grandfather, he used to always say this. There's nobody in the world that you can trust except your mother. Trust your mother. He said, but hey, don't trust anybody else. And, he probably was not wrong, but even your own mother could lie to you. But hopefully you can trust your mother. But the reality is you can't even trust yourself. That's what God is saying. Don't trust your heart. Okay, so the question was, can I trust my emotions to be an indicator of whether or not God is near? So let me take you to another verse of Scripture about that specifically. Go to the book of Luke. I want to show you an example in the Bible. Luke chapter 18. I think the answer in Luke 18 will be in verse 9. I think the answer to the question is kind of obvious now. If you can't trust your heart about all of the issues of life, then I don't think we should trust our heart to be a good indicator of whether or not God is near or far away. You can convince yourself of almost anything. And I mean almost anything, that it's a good idea. People who murder other people, somewhere they convinced themselves it'll be a good idea for me to kill another person. That's hard to comprehend. But killers do that. They convince themselves that it'll be fine. Or they convince themselves at the very least it's the best action to take. I don't think that's a good idea. I think there's always another alternative to taking another person's life as an individual, like vigilante justice. This is why God gives us laws and leaders and establishes government for that purpose. But it's never the right situation for me to take somebody's life because I'm angry with them, or I want to, take revenge for something they did to me or my family. That's not a good situation. But if you think about it long enough, your heart will convince you it's a good idea. Go for it. If you think about it long enough, your heart will convince you it's okay to steal. You'll probably be able to do it and nobody will catch you, and that's okay. Your heart will convince you of almost anything. Your heart will convince you it's a good idea to take illegal street drugs and to go to a party and get high with all of your friends. Your heart will say, yeah, come on, what can happen? I mean, really. I don't think nothing that bad's going to happen. Come on. It'll be a good time. And people do it. People go and take drugs all of the time. And the reason they do is because their heart convinces them that it'll be fun. Nothing that bad will happen. Did you ever see someone who died from a drug overdose? It happens. And even though we know that it happens, people still convince themselves it won't happen to me, right? Your heart will convince you that you can drive 180 down Mahubaskloof. And people try. Just last night, there was a big truck went over the edge of Mahubaskloof. They closed the road today to recover the truck. I don't know, the guy's brakes failed. I don't have any idea what happened. But my point is, every day when I drive, there's people out here convincing themselves that they can drive however they want. They can go as fast as they want. And they must believe nothing bad is going to happen to me. Even though they've seen every time I drive, I see accidents. I see people, dead because of crazy driving. But then somebody else will drive just like that and convince themselves, it won't happen to me. So your heart will lie to you and convince you of almost anything that you want to believe. So when it comes to, let's bring this down to that question. When it comes to spiritual things, when it comes to trying to figure out, is God near or far away? If you rely on your emotions and the feelings in your heart, how, according to the Bible, how possible is it that your heart is going to figure that out and give you the true answer? There's so many things that can influence your heart and deceive your heart. In Luke 18, there's Jesus tells a story about two guys. And we can see this now in a real life situation. These two guys, especially the Pharisee, his heart really, really lied to him and deceived him. He thought that God was near, but the reality is God was nowhere near the Pharisee. Read the story with me. Luke 18. Let's start down here. Layla, can you read verse 9? And then we'll just read down the line from verse 9 to 14.
So some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable.
Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector.
The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I am not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican.
I fast twice in a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. And the publican, standing afar off, would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner.
I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone that exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. So Jesus tells a story, and it's a story. It's not something that really happened, but I think it's it's a very believable story. I think it's the kind of story that you can picture. Yeah, I can see that happening because people are like this. And the reason he tells the story, he tells us why he tells this parable in verse 9. Because he said there's certain people who are trusting in themselves that they are righteous. Okay, think about that. Jesus says in verse 9, there are certain people who trust in themselves that they are righteous. What does that mean? That means in their heart, their emotions and their thoughts are telling them, I think I'm right with God. Interesting. And the reality is, even though they are convinced that they are righteous, because they have this feeling, and because their thoughts have convinced them, yeah, I'm really fine, I'm really right with God. The reality in this story is, this man who was convinced that he was righteous was actually very far from God. So his emotions were lying to him, and his thoughts were lying to him. In fact, we could just say it like that: his heart was deceiving him. He gives the illustration. It helps us to understand. Two men go to the temple to pray. Okay? Anything wrong with that? That's good. Two men go to the temple, and they're going to pray. The temple was a good place to go by that time, that God had given the instructions to the people to go to the temple. And God had told the people they should pray. So nothing wrong here. And who needs to pray? Well, everybody. So both of these men, it's good that they go to pray. One of them is a Pharisee, and one of them is a publican. So we understand the Pharisees were the ones who were teachers of God's law. The problem was they often were very arrogant and very self-righteous and very proud of who they were, thinking that because they are Jewish people, they're like right there next door neighbors with God himself, automatically. Just because their father was, from the tribe of Levi or tribe of Judah, or they're Jewish. It's in their DNA. It's in their blood. We're really the people of God. So they thought about themselves like, we have an advantage over all the other people on the earth. We are the chosen ones of God. Okay? The other man was a publican, a tax collector, a thief, actually. If you want to know what a publican was, that's what he was. He was a thief. He was a professional thief. He was collecting taxes for the Roman government, and he was adding, a line item on top of your taxes. The extra line item was for him. So you pay taxes to the government and to the tax collector. Oh. And everybody knew this. So nobody liked publicans. I mean, who likes the guy who steals from you? And he's stealing from you with like authority. It's like, it's like when the police demand a bribe to do their job. And you need them to do their job, but they refuse unless you pay them the bribe. Eish, who are you going to tell? And they know that, right? They know that I'm the police. No, who's stopping me? And all of my colleagues, we're in this together. We cover for one another. You understand what I'm saying? This is South Africa. Hey, we get this. So it's like they want to steal from you, and they're doing it with authority of the whole police department. So it's like, who are you going to tell? What are you going to do about it? Hey, you can either pay the bribe or, we'll punish you. In fact, we'll put you in jail. They can do whatever they want. So that's kind of like this publican. He's charging you the tax. You know that that's not the right amount, but there's nothing you can do about it, just to pay. If you don't pay, the government's going to come and you're in trouble. So you're going to pay knowing that he's taking 10% or more and putting it in his pocket. How do you feel? Infuriated. I feel betrayed. I feel taken advantage of and powerless. There's nothing I can do. Okay. So the Pharisee seems like the good guy because he's, the teacher of the laws of God. The publican seems like the bad guy because he's the professional thief. Everybody hates him. They go to the temple to pray. And Jesus says that Pharisee in verse 11, look how he says it. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself. God, I thank thee that I am not as other men. Extortioner, I'm not an unjust, I'm not an adulterer, I'm not even like this publican. I fast 2 times in the week. I give tithes of all that I possess. He's making this very beautiful prayer to God. And while he's praying to God, he's, congratulating himself and patting himself on the back for how spiritual and how righteous he is. And then the publican begins to pray. And the publican is standing over here, far off. He doesn't even lift his eyes up to heaven. Why? Because he's guilty of sin and he knows it. He doesn't want to lift the eyes. It's like when a child has done wrong and you're asking them questions to figure out, did you do this? Did you break the window? And they know they broke the window, so what? They don't want to look at you. They don't want to make eye contact because they're ashamed. We've all been ashamed before. This publican is ashamed because he's done sin and he knows it. He doesn't lift his eyes up to heaven. He smites himself on the breast. It was a sign of shame. It was a sign of sorrow. It was a sign of remorse and regret for what I have done. That's why it says, he smote on his breast. And he says, his prayer is this: God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Now, Jesus' conclusion in verse 14, I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone that exalts himself will be abased, and he that humbles himself shall be exalted. So here's 2 guys. You would look at the external evidence when you compare the Pharisee and the publican, and you might say, hey, the publican, he's a thief, and the Pharisee is a teacher. Surely that one is near to God, and the thief is far from God. Okay, maybe. But in this case, that's not at all what's happened. The Pharisee is so proud and is so self-righteous. He's lifted up with pride about how good he is. He doesn't even see his sin. The publican knows that he's a sinner, knows that he's offended God and broken God's law, and knows that he deserves the judgment of God. And their prayers are completely different. This Pharisee is confident that he is near to God. He feels it. His emotions, I think, are telling him, I am really spiritual. Look at me. If he's a Pharisee, he's dressed properly for the temple. I mean, they didn't go to the temple without putting on the proper clothes. You know what I mean. It's like the prophets and, some of the churches, they have their church laws about what you're going to wear when you come, right? So this guy had the proper robe. He had everything. He looked official. The people were respecting him. He had been busy doing all of these things. Fasting. Sometimes somebody asked a question too about fasting. Maybe we'll talk about that one time. He was fasting 2 times every week. Giving tithes of everything. He was so happy with himself. All the good things he's doing for God. And so I think his emotions are telling him, I think his heart is communicating to him, God is very near. I am like this with God. The Pharisee thinks so. But Jesus says, nope. His heart is lying to him. He's actually far from God. The publican, on the other hand, who is honest about his sin, confesses his sin to God, and begs God to show him mercy, that one is actually the one who is near to God. So he probably didn't feel very close to God, the publican. He felt embarrassed. He felt ashamed. He felt sorry about his sin. He's thinking, God will never want me. I've done too much. And the Pharisee is thinking, God, you should be honored to have me. I'm such a good Pharisee. All the good things I do for you. You see how their emotions, I think, are telling them two different stories. And it's not a good indicator. Because for the Pharisee, God is not near. And for the publican, God is very near. Let me finish with one last verse. Go to the book of Isaiah. This topic is all through the Bible, actually. It's a great question. We really shouldn't rely on our emotions to figure out if God is near. Isaiah 57. Just one verse. Isaiah 57, verse 15. And we'll be done with this verse. I want to show you what God says here. Isaiah 57, verse 15. Where did we stop? I think we're back to Lalo. Can you read that one?
But this is what the high and exalted one says. He who lives forever, whose name is holy. I live in a high and a holy place, but also with the one who is contrite and lowly in spirit, to revive the spirit of the lowly and to revive the heart of the contrite.
This is a really interesting verse because the one who's speaking here is God himself. He says, this is what the high and lofty one who inhabits eternity says. The one whose name is holy. That's God, okay? God is the one who's high and lofty. God is the one who dwells in eternity. God is the one whose name is holy, means he's separate from us. God is not like us. I think you know that. Or another way to say that is, we're not like God. The biggest way that we are not like God is we are sinners. We are sinners. And God is not. God is without sin. But then God says something very incredible, very powerful. He says, I dwell in the high and holy place. Okay, we would expect that. The high and holy place where God dwells, I think we would call it heaven. It's where God is. God is everywhere. He's not limited. He's not bound by time and space like us. Right now we're at the university, and this is the only place we can be right now. Later on, I'm going to be home, and when I'm home, I'm not at the university. I'm limited to one location at a time, just like you. God is not. But if we say, where does God live? Where is God's dwelling place? Well, it would be heaven. That's where his throne is. That's where he rules from. But then he says he dwells there with him that is of a contrite and a humble spirit. In other words, God says the one who is with me, the one who is next to me, the one that will be near and close to me, must be having a spirit that is contrite and humble. You know the problem with that Pharisee? He was not contrite and he was not humble. Contrite means to be broken. It literally means to be crushed. It's like when you take when you make mealie meal, and they take the mealies off of the husk of the corn, and what do? They crush it. They crush it. They break it down until it's a powder like that you can put in water and you can cook with. Okay? That crushing is the idea of this word contrite. This is a person who is broken before God about their sin. They've understood God could never, like the publican, God could never accept me like I am. He's so different than me. He's without sin, and I am full of sin. So they come to God with a broken spirit, being honest about their sin, confessing their sin with humility, asking God to please have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. And God says, that's the one that is near me. So that question, can you trust your emotions as a good indicator if God is near or not? No, you can't. Because your emotions are probably going to tell you God is near when you do good. God is near when you do better. God is near when you fill in the blank. When you go to church, maybe you feel like God is near if you got baptized. Maybe you felt like God was near if you took a communion. Or you felt like God was near if some powerful prophet prayed for you. You felt like God was near because you helped some person in their time of need. And the reality is that's not an indicator of whether God is near or not. God said He's near the one who has a contrite and a humble spirit. The one who knows that I have no chance of being next to God because my sin is too much. My only chance of being next to God, to coming near to God, is actually in the blood sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And when the sinner understands that and confesses his sin to God and puts all of his trust in Christ to be the only possible way for me to come near to God, that's when a sinner can experience real salvation. That's why real salvation is so different than what most people find. Most people find a fake salvation. I call it a fake salvation because it's not real. They think it's salvation because, some pastor laid hands on them. Show me that in the Bible. How does that bring you next to God? They think it's a salvation because they went back to the church and they started going to church. That's nice. I can take my dog to church. Is my dog saved? Don't think so. No chance. No chance. I like my dog, but he's a dog. Hey, she's a dog. He does dog things. We don't want to talk about what dogs do. They're dogs. Eh? So take your dog to church. It doesn't make him a Christian. But people think, if I go to church, it means I'm next to God. No, it doesn't. God's not impressed. People think, I give money. Well, the Pharisee said that. I give tithes of all that I possess. I must be next to God. No. Oh, come on, I'm fasting 2 times a week. I think God, He sees how good I am. Nope. Nope. God actually says, I'm near the one who is humble and broken about his sin. I'm near to the one who calls on me to show him mercy for his sin, and specifically the one who puts his confidence in Jesus Christ as the one who paid the penalty for my sin to bring me back to God. That's why Jesus came. And you say, what is the indicator to know if I'm near to God or not? Well, two things I will say. Are you contrite and humble about your sin? Because that's who God says is near to him. And have you believed on Jesus Christ as the only payment for your sin to bring you near to God by his blood? It's the requirement. Those two things. Are you contrite and humble about your sin? And have you really believed on Christ? That's how to know that you are near to God. Your emotions will come and go. One day you'll feel really close to God. Another day you'll feel like, God, where are you? That's not a good indicator. If you have a humble and a contrite spirit about sin, and if you know that you have Christ, you have believed on him, you are his child, then God is near. God is near, no matter how you feel. Sometimes things happen in life and it feels like God is far away. And you ask God, why is this happening? Can you fix this? Take this problem away, and nothing changes. Maybe you begin to ask questions. Is God near? Well, the circumstances and your feelings don't determine whether or not God is near. God is near the one who is humble, contrite, and is a true believer in Jesus Christ. That's what the Bible teaches. Okay, let me stop there. Let me ask you before we finish. We'll pray in a second, and then I'll let you guys go. Let me ask you if you have some other questions you want to add to a list, and I'll keep a list going so that when we meet for Bible studies, we can answer some of these questions from the Bible. Maybe you have a question that's on your mind right now. Maybe not. That's fine. If you do, you can say so.